Good Erev Shabbos. Welcome to the first Shabbos of the new year. It's pretty instructive that the very first Shabbos of the year is called Shabbos Shuvah or Shabbos Teshuvah, the idea being one of return, a return to essence, a return to source, a return to Hashem, a return to innocence, which presupposes an awareness of that identity in us. This week, the Torah portion is Ha'azinu, and it's basically a poem of testimony that begins with Moshe calling upon both heaven and earth to bear witness to the divine message that he's about to deliver to the Jewish people. And he encourages the Jewish people to remember their history, to recall how Hashem chose them to be his people, gave them the Torah, and shepherded us through the desert on the way from Egypt to the land of Israel. And he tells the Jewish people how God would provide for them with material bounty in the land of Israel, but also cautioned them that they shouldn't overindulge, because should they, it might cause them to rebel against Hashem, and it probably would. And he cautions the Jewish people that overindulgence in their wealth will cause them to rebel, and Hashem would then punish us for our misdeeds, but nevertheless he would not forsake us. And he tells the Jewish people that they'll receive their corrective punishment for their lapse in loyalty to Hashem's covenant. And then Hashem subsequently would comfort them and punish those that had persecuted them, and that ultimately even the non-Jewish nations of the world would appreciate the Jewish people and praise them for remaining true to their bond with Hashem, with God. And after that, Moshe starts getting ready to shuffle off this mortal coil. I'm sharing this with you because there's an interesting medrash. It's a Haggadah in the Talmud. A story about Rabbi Eliezer ben Shimon coming back from wherever he'd been and bumping into an extremely ugly person who's traveling in the same direction. The man greets him and says, "Shalom, Rabbi." And the rabbi looks at him and says, "Tell me, is everybody in your town as ugly as you are?" The guy sort of ponders for a moment and answers, "I don't know that, but why don't you go ask the craftsman who made me why he made me so ugly?" Good answer. And as Rabbi Eliezer hears the reply, he understands that he's made a serious gaffe, and he falls to his feet and pleads for forgiveness. And the man insists that, "I won't forgive you until you go to the maker who fashioned me and complain that he made me so ugly. Go on." And finally he keeps on asking for forgiveness, and finally the man says, "If you promise never to do that again." And the man is never actually named, and there is a theory that the man of such ugliness was actually Rabbi Eliezer himself. After years of Torah study and elevated prayer, Rabbi Eliezer was pained by feelings of vanity and arrogance. He had the self-awareness to see how he had changed and how self-satisfied he'd become, and he looked inside in a mood of putting him down himself, self-criticism. After all that spiritual work, your personality still harbors ego and dark ambitions, and you're rotten and you are ugly. This is what Rabbi Eliezer ben Shimon was saying to himself. And this whole conversation is actually an internal conversation between him and his shadow. Who was he? Was he this great sage of Israel? Or was he this narcissistic, selfish egotist? He felt ugly because he had begun to identify those lowly cravings that he felt with who he was. He looked for his soul and he found his ego. And he realizes that to say one's ugly really means to say that God created an ugly soul, and God doesn't do that. We have our contradictions, we have our petty thoughts, we have our Yetzer Haras, we have our dark cravings that would probably be scared out of our pants if they were actually ever satisfied or made available. Those are the struggles of living in a difficult world. But when we begin to identify the wrong we feel or have done with who we truly are, that's a problem. That's a problem. Even babies realize that I'm not dirty. I'm not stinky. It's my diaper that's stinky. As Reb Shlomo of Karlin put it, the greatest tragedy is to forget that we're children of God. We need to remember always that even while our conscious moods may betray our highest ideals, that we don't always live up to our resolutions, our essence remains pure and crafted by God. Again, otherwise, the idea of teshuvah would have no meaning. There'd be nothing to be returning to. So we have to remember that we're as clay in the hands of the craftsman, as the piyut, the prayer says that we read on Yom Kippur, and we are God's best creation. And we mustn't confuse who we are with some of the less than desirable things we feel. We mustn't allow ourselves to be identified or defined by our unholy and obnoxious cravings. The truth is that we are golden. We are stardust. Yom Kippur comes along and says, you're not held captive by the past. You're afforded the opportunity to fashion your character anew as we move into this new year, to mold yourself into the person that you truly can become and that you were sent into this world to become. And so we read through Ha'azinu and we realize that Moshe wouldn't bother giving this kind of lecture to the Jewish people. He wouldn't sing this particular song unless there was something underneath it all to listen to and to respond positively to. There's an ancient tradition that everything and everything that ever was and ever will be is contained within this particular parsha, Parshas Ha'azinu. Please God, we should be able to find ourselves in it and find ourselves making manifest the good that's waiting for us to do this year and the years to come, in good health, good circumstance. Wish you a Shabbat Shalom, a Shabbat Shuva Shalom, and please God, a Gemar Chassimus Tova.